All right, so now it's time to have a plan of action. I am Andrea Schokker, and I'm a structural engineer. And big spoiler alert, my research area is concrete structures. So concrete structures will feature prominently in our zombie-proof or zombie-resistant structures. I like to say resistant instead of proof. For instance, earthquake-resistant instead of earthquake-proof, because 24/7, the structure by itself cannot be totally zombie-proof. And we'll find out why as we go forward. All right, so we're going to have to talk just a little bit about some of the structural engineering basics. I've got one whole equation. We're going to look at some design and code-related issues, because the fact is, we know this apocalypse is coming, and we better go ahead and start design now, particularly for the kind of structures that I'm talking about. And that means, since all the code bodies and governing bodies don't fully appreciate that this is going to happen, we're going to have to design by the current codes. And luckily, the current codes are set up for safety, first and foremost. And then I'll tell you a little bit about serviceability and resiliency that are going to be important for this as well. Materials. What material are we going to use? I'll give you a big guess. It's concrete. We're going to look at what are the key features that we need to have for our zombie-proof housing. And how do we put this all together so that you can start making your plan as we go forward. All right, here's my one equation. It is, for structural design of the stuff I'm talking about, we basically follow what's called load and resistance factor design. We call it LRFD. All you need to know is the left-hand side is the loads, so that's the weight of the structure, the zombies, the earthquake, the whatever. The right-hand side of this is the resistance. This is the strength. What are you making it out of? How big is it? All those types of things. And we obviously want the strength to be bigger than the loads that are applied. And we take that a little bit further and say, not only is it going to be bigger, we're going to go ahead and put some safety factors on that. So I don't know all the loads super well, and the less I know the load, the more safety factor I'm going to put on. So on the left here, you see we've got dead loads, we've got live loads, and believe it or not, this is really what we call these. And a zombie load is not a dead load, it's a live load, just the way it works in the code. A dead load is self-weight. We know that pretty well, so we're just going to give that a 20% increase. Live loads are stuff like people, books, chairs, and sometimes that changes. So we give that a little bit bigger kick, a 40% increase. Earthquake, wind, impact, zombies, those types of things we really don't know well, and we don't necessarily expect the worst earthquake and the worst windstorm and the worst zombie attack all at the same time. So we have different ways of combining these things. As a structural engineer, I try to be conservative and take into account everything I can possibly find. So regardless of what everybody else says about whether they're shamblers or rumblers or whatever, they're runners, they go through water, they go through everything. I look at all those movies and I take the worst case. And so that's what we're doing. And then I try to invent things that are even worse than that. So probably I need a really high zombie load modifier or multiplier. But luckily, zombies do fit pretty well within my live loads and some of the things that we already designed for, particularly in the last few years. So I'm going to talk about that. On the right side is the strength. And what we multiply on that side is usually a number under 1. So I may say, I calculate it's going to be this strong, but I'm only going to account for 80% of that. So we won't go into how those happen, but just know that we want that blue side to be much higher than the other side. Okay, so obviously safety is paramount. Serviceability is something else we designed for. Serviceability is what keeps this floor from vibrating or having too much deflection. It's safe, but you wouldn't like it. You'd start to get a little worried if the floor started deflecting by a foot, right? That would get us all out of here pretty quick, or shaking. It just means, does the structure perform as intended? So I'm sorry to say, but after the first week, you're not going to want to live in a windowless house or a bunker or something without light and be in solitary confinement. You're going to want to have a little bit of occupant comfort and functionality, because we're probably in for the long haul. If we're not, great, but as a structural engineer, I'm planning for the long haul. And by the way, all the pictures are real pictures that I have in here. I don't know who owns those windowless houses, but maybe they're planning for the zombie apocalypse. All right, so here's the third term, and you may not have heard this one as much, at least in terms of structures. Resilience. Okay, so resilience by definition is a structure or a system or a community that we expect to resist an extreme event, which we're seeing more and more of weather-wise, right? climate change and this sort of thing, with minimal damage and minimal disruption of functionality. So whatever I'm making this structure, it's going to have to either not be damaged when this happens, or it's got to rebound quickly. So my extreme event is the zombie apocalypse. All right, so we've got to get that thing functional, and it needs to be as better or as good or better after the apocalypse starts as prior to that. Sorry. The good news here is we are actually getting research funding in resiliency because of all the extreme events. So I do get funding to work on zombie-proof housing, although the funding agencies might not know that, so be quiet. Incidentally, this is a picture after a hurricane in a neighborhood. That's a concrete house. There used to be a lot more houses there. All right, so material choice. What do you think we're going to use? Now, in all seriousness, the top three for residences and things that we do are steel, wood, and concrete. The top two for commercial are steel and concrete. There are other materials like composites and things like that. Don't have time to go into it, but rest assured, if we look at the considerations we need for our project, strength, durability, availability. Let's say we have to start making something after the apocalypse. I'm not going to go down to the local steel mill and fire it up and try to get a beam going, right? I can make concrete. Resiliency. So what's resiliency? It's got to resist fire. It doesn't burn. Wood does not meet that. Water. So it resists water. It doesn't mold. All those types of things. I skipped lack of vulnerable connections, but start thinking about this. So these zombies, they may evolve, they pull apart things. If I have that sheet metal nonsense that we saw at the beginning, that's nothing. I mean, for many reasons, that's no good. But it also has vulnerabilities between the sheet metal. That steel stud house, I put the plywood on, or whatever I put on, there's still vulnerabilities in there. This thing on the bottom, which is a real structure, I can't remember if it's a museum or what it was, it is no seams. It also has this formable or custom shape. All right, I don't know about you, but I saw that World War Z movie, and I can't unsee that part where those zombies go up and just go over that huge wall. I can't get over it. I want something like this, where they can't crawl up that wall. It's nice and smooth. I'm feeling a lot more comfortable with this than I am with that wall. All right, this is an important public service announcement. Concrete and cement are not the same thing. The cement is the powder, the concrete's the hard stuff. It's got cement, which is actually only like 10% or less. It's got water, it's got sand, it's got rock. Okay, and there's some other subtleties in there. This is really important for other reasons, including climate change issues and CO2. But just rest assured, they are not the same thing, and you have one major duty tonight, and that is to tell everyone you know that cement is the powder and concrete's the hard stuff. That is not a cement sidewalk, that is a concrete sidewalk. I can't even read a book without this driving me crazy. So I hope it drives you crazy now too, and you can pass that along to everybody. All right, so what are our design options here? This is the only not real picture that I've got in here, but it cracked me up. So those are a bunch of treadmills lined around a house. There's some good innovation here. We've got renewable energy sources. We got everything going on, but I can see some problems. Some of the options that come to my mind or that you'll find if you start perusing around on the internet are movable walls, shutters for windows, because we're going to have light in at some point here. Let's stay away from a lot of ground floor entrances. Let's avoid that sort of thing. Drawbridges are popular, moats, isolated islands. Underground, you have less things to defend if you're underground. You have maybe one or two entrances. You can get off the ground with stilts. So that one house we saw was actually on stilts for different reasons, as far as we know. We need sunlight as humans. We need places to plant things, because again, we're in for the long haul here. I read a lot of those apocalyptic books, zombie or not, so I'm in it. We're going to need renewable energy sources. The batteries are going to run out at some point, so we should start planning on this. And finally, the term we like to use in engineering and other places is belts and suspenders. If my belt breaks, I still got the suspenders to hold up my pants and vice versa. You want systems that have belts and suspenders when you're in a zombie apocalypse. All right, so I'm just going to run through a couple of these things real quick. This one comes up. Go Google zombie-proof housing. This one comes up pretty quickly. I think this is even the one John might have sent me. Movable walls Window shutters. Now this is a gorgeous house. Look down on the bottom side, right? It's a gorgeous house, lots of windows. It's got big concrete shutter things. It's got a drawbridge and what I call kind of the airlock. This is not a real airlock in the medical sense, but an airlock concept. In other words, there should always be a minimum of 2 doors between where you are and where the zombies can get in, right? So that we catch the sneaky ones that get through the door and overpower, which you never see that on the darn shows. They don't know that. The problem with this one for me is I don't want anything that relies on electricity necessarily or power, okay? So belts and suspenders tells me that if I have to go and close this to this all hands by myself someday when the horde is coming over the hill, particularly those World War Z ones that are really fast, this does not look like what I want to be doing, sliding a bunch of concrete walls and shutters around. So cool idea, probably wouldn't be the place I go. Islands, remote locations. The remote is good and it's also bad. Okay, you're away from other humans, you're away from other food sources, all those things. And I still don't have the question fully answered on water. My son tells me they can walk along the bottom and then just creep up the other side. So while this one's defendable, by the way, this is an island that Iceland gave to Björk, the singer. And so she is set, unless of course the zombies start walking out of the water. The other concept I really like to think about here is we are people and we're social. So we should probably start thinking about communities, not just our own fortress, particularly as we go on. So the community was, again, that sheet metal attempt that they do in a lot of the movies where you all hide behind the sheet metal and the zombies come in and you're all dead. So the upper left hand is the mothership of Apple. Okay, so Apple has their building in a circle and there's this nice community inside courtyard. This is lovely thought for zombie proof stuff, right, community? So instead of the wall that they all just crawl up and pile over and we all get attacked, in here we live in the ring, so if we need to go lock down, we're actually in that wall. And then I had to add that nice curved concrete part so they can't get over the wall and all that good stuff. And look, I've got sunlight when the zombies aren't attacking, and hopefully they can't get in anyway. I've got sunlight, I've got growing space. I've got a fairly reasonable community. And this actually is not a small building. So we could take this one over if we need to. The other two are the Louvre. So that just gives you another idea of a courtyard concept enclosed with sunlight and also open. Back when we had to defend large territories, this was a good option. It becomes a good option again. Raised structures, we've talked about the stilts, we've talked about all these things. This is quite the trend in contemporary housing anyway. Architects love this stuff. I like this type of thing. Again, I don't want that horde of them kind of crawling over. So I'm liking a lot of those types of structures. Here's another version, although they've resorted to those darn concrete walls, but maybe a little bit more approachable version. All right, let's talk a little bit about life underground. Remember, we've got to have some comfort level here. We can do this. Now, interestingly, this is a real property that was for sale years ago in New York, in the rural areas of New York. It is built over a missile silo, abandoned missile silo. So it is a nice little cabin, looks everything normal, except for the airport that it has with it. And then it's got the underground silo that can be renovated. You got to deal with ventilation, you got to deal with all those things. The picture in the upper right is just a reminder that even if I'm underground, I need some things that help me with that perception. So this is not really a window to outside. This is actually screens, so you got to think about some of that. This is what the inside of that silo actually looks like. You can Google that one pretty fast. Do missile silo house. And then up here on the left, this is a real website, Hardened Structures. It's a company that does hardened structures. They don't say zombies, but I know they mean zombie apocalypse when they're doing this, because they've got every possible apocalyptic scenario. They hire the experts. These guys, they've got it down. Go check out the website. I do not work for them. Other existing structures, bunkers, water towers. There's a bunch of water towers that look a little bit like this one, old missile silos, and any structure that we're designing nowadays for resiliency is probably one to take a look at. These are both water towers. Again, I love that concept where they can't get up there. And this is my kind of final picture slide. Again, water tower. Look at that. Look at all that sunny space up there with no zombie approach. Here's that same dome approach with another glass ceiling, raised off the ground. This is the Motion Picture something museum, or I don't know, remember what now. But it's a real structure, just like this other one. So in a pinch, if you can't get this done before the apocalypse happens, and you're not prepared like I am, then you need to start scouting these structures out. I'll leave you with, you need to start looking for this right now. You need to start thinking about it. You can call it resiliency and plan for extreme events, but we all know the real extreme event that we're planning for, and you need to do it before it's too late. How many engineers are in the room, or pre-engineers? Okay, you each need to have one of those on your team so that you can go ahead forward with this. So thank you.